Okay, so first, right off the bat, I'm gonna address why this is a first thoughts video, and not a final thoughts or is it worth the hate. One simple reason. I did not finish the game, and therefore giving it a full review would be disingenuous. As such, this is more of a rant than a review. Now, I'm going to be discussing the remaster, Chain of Memories for the PS4, which is, of course, originally a PS2 title, which itself was a remake of a Game Boy Advance game. Fundamentally, the PS2 and Game Boy versions are essentially the same, but look different, with the PS2 version using reused assets from Kingdom Hearts, and I believe a bit of Kingdom Hearts 2. The Game Boy version used some very nicely done sprites by contrast, but beyond that, and maybe a few small alterations, I believe they're essentially the same title. Mind you, I have even less experience with the GBA version, and that was quite a long time ago I played it. That being said, the GBA renditions of the soundtrack are pretty impressive attempts at recreating the first game's soundtrack, with a few of them coming pretty close to the original. And the game even has an intro FMV, which is nothing to sneeze at for the handheld. Honestly, I don't really need to say much about the visuals or soundtrack. Since it's primarily reused, it looks and sounds great. Although many of the cutscenes seem to be pre-rendered, and while they're vastly better looking than the theater mode in KH 1.5 Remix, they look pretty pixelated at full resolution. Which, again due to my recording hardware, doesn't really show up much in the review. Strangely enough, the remaster uses the PS2 version's soundtrack instead of the reorchestrated tracks like 1.5, but perhaps that was done for variety, and it's not like the PS2 version sounded anything less than excellent. Also, like the other remasters, the game has been boosted to 60 frames per second on the PS4, but it makes very little difference given the style of gameplay. The story begins almost immediately following the epilogue of the first Kingdom Hearts, with Sora, Donald, and Goofy giving chase after Pluto in search of King Mickey. And one of the first things you'll probably note is that Sora literally hit puberty overnight.
That way, to the door.
Are you scared?
Okay, in justification for that, this game came out like 2 years after Kingdom Hearts 2, so Sora's voice actor, Haley Joel Osment, was much older than he was in the first game, and I do appreciate them attempting to keep the same voices for most of the cast. Probably the biggest change, which also started with Kingdom Hearts 2, was switching Billy Zane out for Richard Epcar as Ansem, and it just doesn't work. Epcar is a fine voice actor, and he's done a lot of good performances, but he sounds nothing like Zane in the role. It makes me wish that if they had to recast the guy, they should have gotten like Phil LaMarr to do his vamp voice from Metal Gear Solid 2. It sounds fairly similar, and LaMarr has done voices for Disney before. Anyway, the actual plot is that Sora and his friends stumble into Castle Oblivion, a place where memories are part of the fabric of it. Sora's memories continually get rewritten and turned into cards as the mysterious Organization 13 attempts to manipulate him. It sounds weird, but surprisingly this game has one of the strongest plots in the entire franchise. We actually see Sora show a lot of different emotions throughout the story, and the antagonists are fairly diverse and interesting. Even better, that's only half of the plot. There's an entire second story where you take control of Riku as he tries to reclaim his heart from the darkness and teams up with King Mickey to do so. So if the story is so good, why didn't I bother to finish the game, you're probably asking? Well, it's because the gameplay is complete and total ass. I respect the team for trying to do something new, especially given the hardware limitations of the GBA, but there's no reason the PS2 version needed to keep the same core combat, and I say that as somebody who usually gets super miffed if you change the core gameplay in a remake, but for this, I'll make an exception. You see, about 75% of the game is built on RNG, and the other half is built on trying to outright break the game. As mentioned before, Sora's memories are continually turned into cards as you progress Castle Oblivion, and these represent the various worlds from the original. Oh, and since I didn't mention it while talking about the story, I'll just say this. The worlds offer nothing new. They are essentially one-to-one abridged rehashes of Kingdom Hearts 1's worlds, except Traverse Town, which actually did attempt to tie into the main plot, but the rest will not even remotely give a shit. You use cards for pretty much everything except platforming and initiating combat. Open a door? Need a card. Save your game? Need a card. Actually fight? Need a card. And cards drop randomly. Wanna save? Too bad, you gotta run around and hope that a card drops that allows you to make a save room. Sometimes you find cards in boxes, but most of them are gained by beating enemies. You need to get different cards to beat enemies. You need cards to get cards. On top of that, even if you have the right card type you want, they have levels, so you need a high enough level of a card to open the door to begin with. There's a limited number of doors in each area, and, unless I'm wrong, going back to the previous intermission areas, which are the only free save points, resets your progress. Now, it sounds like this wouldn't be too terrible beyond maybe the RNG aspect, and it really wouldn't be, except the combat sucks. Bad! Combat finds you able to run and jump and roll like Kingdom Hearts 1, but fighting, casting spells, healing, using items, all of them are decided by cards. Every card has a numbered value from 0 to 9. If you play a higher card than your enemy, it inflicts a card break status, which acts like a block and allows you to attack without interruptions, and vice versa. The exception is playing a 0. 0 cards can be deflected by anything if played first, but you can also counter any card with them. The problem is, if you're fighting multiple enemies and you use a 0 to counter, the next enemy will inevitably do the same to you. It's not so bad in boss battles or one-on-one encounters, but in group battles, it's aggravating to counter only to immediately be staggered. And there lies the biggest problem with the combat. It's entirely based on the numbers. Want to heal? You need a higher number Cure Spell card, but to have a higher number Cure Spell card, you'll have to either luck out and win one from somewhere, or find one through a treasure room, which means relying on RNG on top of RNG. There is a shop, but honestly, I haven't come across one. So it basically becomes a game of highest card wins, which means grinding to get better cards. One of the things you can use to your advantage is the combo system. By saving up 3 cards, you can unleash a built-up card value, which sounds pretty cool, except the first card used in the combo will be removed until the end of battle, unless you have a certain card that restores everything, I believe. If you use specific combinations, you can use a Slight, which is the game's equivalent of your special moves. Stuff like an Ice Spell and 2 normal attacks can result in Sora using Ice Raid, or getting a certain number value with 3 cards could wind up giving you a specific skill. This causes another issue with the combat. You eventually start trying to spam your strongest moves just so you can get through fights as quickly as possible, and some moves pretty much break the game. I believe Lethal Frame and Sonic Blade is a combo that can basically destroy the entire game for you, including against most boss battles, so you wind up using just the same skill over and over and over and over for all eternity. Even in the early game, if I had the chance to speed through a fight like that without a broken skill, I typically use it just to get through the fight faster. Stronger spells are also used in this fashion. 2 cures results in Cura, 3 blizzards for Blizzaga, etc, etc. Of course, you might be thinking, well, isn't that the idea? And yeah, that's a fair argument. The issue is that it's not fun, and it makes the game feel really mindless and repetitive. This basically winds up making the game fall under 2 categories: spamming until you win, or desperately hoping you have the cards to get to the next point until you can get the spammy skills. Oh, and don't even think Goofy, Donald, and the other party members are going to save you. Instead of having them at your beck and call, they too are restricted by RNG. You have to hope one of their cards spawns so you can use them, and they too, along with summons, can also be broken. You can't do anything while they're active. Low on health but called Goofy in for support? Too bad. Even though you can still move around, you're not going to be able to heal yourself with that Cure card until he finishes his attack and disappears. On top of needing to grind for cards and some skills, you also need to grind for XP, because every card has a card value, so you can't just equip everything you want to your deck. On top of that, I don't even think Sora's stats actually increase at level up. Instead, you have to choose between HP, card points, or slights. Enemies also get an HP bonus every time you clear a world, but I don't think they get any attack bonuses, so, that helps. But still, the HP boost can make fights drag on more. And it's not like the enemy parties are small. Typically, you tend to wind up fighting multiple waves of like 5+ enemies. Worse yet, if you're playing as Riku, you don't even get to customize your deck. It's pre-customized per world. Apparently, Wonderland is rather infamous with him, and it's already a pain in the ass with Sora. Also, enemies don't work like they did in previous games. Instead, you see them on the map and can smack them or throw stuff at them for a slight advantage. Hitting or touching them will shift to another screen, kind of like a typical JRPG, which isn't a bad thing in of itself, especially considering the original hardware it was built for. It's perfectly fine from a gameplay perspective, and I actually kind of like the idea of getting a combat advantage by ambushing foes. But honestly, I just can't find much positive to say about the game. I wanted to enjoy it. When my friends kept telling me to ignore it completely and just watch the cutscenes online, I went ahead and tried anyway. I'm sorry, I just did not have any fun with this. I'd recommend you take their advice. Skip the game, watch the cutscenes online before jumping into Kingdom Hearts 2. Because not only does it help Kingdom Hearts 2 actually make an iota of sense, but it also does have a legitimately good story and characters outside of the Disney rehashes. If you enjoy this game, then I'm happy for you, but I couldn't be bothered to complete it once, let alone a second time as Riku. I have no problems with card game battle systems, and even enjoy a handful of RPGs that use similar concepts. I could have gotten past the grinding and RNG if it was fun, but this system just does not work well.
What? Hi, yes. Oh, yeah? I'll try some magic.
Thunder! 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 Thundercats!
Thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry if this wasn't quite the type of video you were hoping for. Hopefully it wasn't too heavy for something that really isn't meant to be a full review. If you want something a bit more positive, you can still check out my review of the first Kingdom Hearts. Or maybe you want something more optimistic, like my first thoughts video on those new Persona 5 announcements instead. And if that's not enough, well, I can shill my Final Fantasy VII playthrough again.